Tech billionaire Elon Musk officially left the White House last week, renouncing his role as head of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Now, in Musk's 4 months overseeing government spending cuts, 250,000 civil servants were fired or took buyouts. Notably, the entire foreign aid agency, USAID, was dismantled, and grants and staffing at environmental agencies were cut, including the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as NOAA, which does weather and climate work. However, lawsuits, mandatory rehirings, and protests followed. Still, President Trump says efficiency work will continue and that Musk himself will remain, quote, back and forth at the White House. So with us now to dive a little bit deeper into where Musk's exit leaves government efforts to cut spending, Thomas Hayes. Thomas is the founder and chairman and managing member of Great Hill Capital, a long-short equity manager in New York. Thomas, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for taking time.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Okay, Musk was only supposed to work a short time, a certain number of days, I think 130 or something like that. But why did Elon Musk leave now? His businesses have been losing a fortune, and DOGE simply under fire, even from a lot of powerful GOP members, for not delivering what he had characterized. So talk about how you think this went for Musk and for the country.
Well, I think it was a net positive, $175 billion in cuts in just a few months. He came in January. He's been there through May. And he did say that it is now embedded in the DNA of government. So what do we mean by embedded? That's kind of a catchphrase. Well, actually, what they've done is they've put DOGE employees as political appointments in every single agency in the government to carry out the efficiencies and the cuts and the getting rid of waste and spending at the granular micro level by agency, which means that the possibility of actually achieving $1 trillion of cuts over the next year, 2 years, is not outside the realm of possibility. The key is it sends a signal to the market. This administration is very serious about fiscal responsibility, and that's going to be very, very important. As you know, we have a lot of debt to refinance, and we did have that recent downgrade by Moody's. So we do want to see this to continue in the direction of efficiency, of cutting waste, showing fiscal responsibility, and I think it's off to a good start. Interesting take on that, because if you look at what Trump is proposing right now, economists say over the next 10 years, it's going to add $3.8 trillion to the U.S. deficit. And right now, critics are simply bristling that Musk, a man who gets billions of dollars from the United States government, is the guy determining what should be cut and how. So let's talk about how Musk's D.C. business increased during his time with the Trump administration. And you talk about debt being chipped away, but there are legions of people out there say, no, that's not going to happen. Well, look, if there was anyone else that could do what Musk has been doing, they would do it already. I mean, we had to send him up to pick up the astronauts at the space station because other companies couldn't get it done, as well as the reusable rockets and the efficacy and the lower cost of launching satellites to space, both from a private sector standpoint and from a government standpoint. So there's a lot that Musk is doing simply because no one else can do it. If you look at Starlink, if you look at communication, if you now look at xAI, he's raising $300 million at $113 billion valuation. Neuralink, he's raising another $650 million was announced. And this is all in the last 24 hours. So he gave a tremendous amount of sacrifice to the country at his own expense. You saw it reflected in the stock price in the short term. It dropped over 50% from $485 down to $225. It's since recovered largely because he's decided to redevote himself to the private sector and be less involved, certainly in a formal way, in the government. But if he carries out, and if it is in fact in the DNA, and they can continue this efficiency for the next year, 2 years, I think it's going to go a long way. As it relates to Trump's bill, you know, the one thing that I think is underestimated, and the only way you can get out of this whole 120% debt to GDP, is the exact same way that we did post-World War II when debt to GDP was 120%. And you have to grow your way out of it. You got to grow your way out of it, in part by letting inflation run a little bit hot and by having pro-growth deregulation policies, which certainly are at the forefront of this administration's policy initiatives.
Okay, but a lot of people are also saying, look, it's time to rein in government spending. I hear what you're saying, but not the way Musk and his staff of mostly very young people with no government experience went about it, slashing wildly when critics, and again, a lot of GOP members, said that they should have used a scalpel instead of a chainsaw. How do you react to that?
Well, to your point, in the scheme of things, $175 billion was de minimis. However, if you look at the amount of days that he was in office, and it works out to just about $1.5 billion per day, if you continue at that rate and you have a greater specialized knowledge now that you have each of these DOGE employees and political appointments in specific agencies, so there can be a dialogue versus just taking a hatchet to the cuts, right. I think you're going to get, number one, more depth in the cuts, and number two, more precision. But to your point, more has to be done, and more has to be done with greater precision. The key is better an imperfect plan executed today than a perfect plan tomorrow, because tomorrow never comes. The key is the ball got rolling. Can we self-correct if some things got cut that shouldn't have gotten cut and other things didn't get cut that need to get cut? Sure, we can. The key is he got the ball rolling. He gave a sacrifice. He didn't have to do that. He still had the president's ear with or without DOGE. Right. And I think that will go a long way for us refinancing the debt, getting borrowing costs down. And then the second thing is obviously Besant deregulating with the SLR and making it easier for banks to own treasuries and create demand at the longer end of the curve, certainly 10-year treasuries this summer, which he's spoken about publicly on TV, which will bring down mortgage rates, which will bring down refinancing rates for the U.S. government, and that will go a long, long way to making housing more affordable and getting the growth that the economy so sorely needs to grow its way out of such a high debt to GDP ratio. That's a function of many administrations' missteps and kicking the can down the road. Now it has to be dealt with.
But in kicking the can down the road and you get the ball rolling, arguably you're rolling over people as well. Some of the more controversial cuts, USAID, especially with the head of the UN saying that thousands of children around the world are now going to die because of this action. That's a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, there's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be unintended consequence. I think as you get these employees focused on specific silos and they can see the impacts of the specific decisions, they can be more surgical about it and avoid unfavorable outcomes prospectively. But we still got to get to that $1 trillion plus number. So there is going to be some pain in the short term. Hopefully, it'll just be more constructed and better executed, so that we're dealing with the things that we can afford to deal without versus the things that might be more critical.